Hi, class. So, welcome back. This is our follow-up to our first intro video where we talked about the semester, what things are going to look like, overall view of kind of the whole picture. Um, One thing that we discussed quite a bit was managing expectations. So, I think that's really important from both of our sides in this class. So, as a teacher, I've seen students get really frozen up when they have this sense in their head that they have a really hard time doing things, not doing things really well. So like being a beginner, starting over, it's hard. I understand it's hard for me too. Frustrating when you think, you're so bad at something. And I've seen people totally freeze up and not be able to work at all. So, not only are you not going to learn how to draw if you're totally frozen up and not working, but if you don't do anything, it's going to be hard to get a decent mark in the class. So really, it's not in anyone's benefit if you get to that point where you're frozen up and can't draw because you're worried about it not looking good. And most of the time, that'll come down to managing your expectations of what a good drawing is. So, like we discussed, traditionally people think of these kind of photographic drawings as a good drawing. And while that might be a well-crafted drawing, uh, great draftsmanship, penmanship, however you want to put that, it doesn't always mean that a drawing's bad if it doesn't look that way. There's some really loose, completely abstract, strange drawings out there that are genius, amazing drawings, and they just don't fit that traditional mold of some perfectly rendered figure or something like that. So we're going to look at the slideshow that serves to start breaking down those expectations of what a good drawing is. So I'm going to link up my screen real quick and we'll go through this. This isn't meant to be a full-on art history lecture, but there will be some degree of discussion around the way that drawing served artists in the past and its purpose into the future. So I'm just going to get this all set up for us. All right, so the first images we're looking at are from an artist named Andreas Vesalius, and he was really prominent in medicine in the 1800s, I guess you could say. I mean, he was making these engravings. Won't really get too into what an engraving is versus a drawing, but it's basically able to be reproduced. So you can make prints, but the actual act of making it is no different. Is very analogous to drawing. So he would record early studies in science and medicine and surgery. Early on, when surgery and medicine was coming out of what they called barbershops, not a place where you go get your hair cut, but they called them barbershops, where you'd go. I mean, it's like a step away from a witch doctor. Basically, you'd go, and if you were sick or something was wrong with you, and they'd put leeches on you and bloodlet and do weird things that probably didn't actually help you, because they didn't really truly understand how the body worked and what was necessary to help heal people. So history of medicine is a pretty gruesome history. A lot of surgeons were told by the church that they couldn't. It was against the law to work on bodies and learn more about the human body. So they were actually going out and robbing graves. I mean, it's gruesome, and if you take an anatomy class, you'll learn more about that. But won't get too into it. What's important here is what we're seeing in this image is they would have these what's called an operating theater, where it would actually be kind of a theater or lecture area where there could be students in the pews or in the audience watching. So there'd be other medical students or other surgeons and people like Andreas Vesalius that would record it. They didn't have cameras back then, so the drawings served as a way to record it and share the information. Obviously, this is a bit dramatized in that there's, it probably didn't actually look like this with skeletons standing up and holding signs. So it's a, fantastical version of what's actually happening. But some of these images are more straightforward. Human body, if you look up closely, you can see that there's these little numbers, and they would correspond with the chart with all the names for those muscles. So, drawing was a way in this period of communicating information. It had a more scientific kind of purpose to it. He would still take artistic liberty with these. I mean, he could have just had a human body laying on a medical bed, but he's got this figure standing up in the Italian countryside. So he is making these artistic decisions. It's got weird kind of emotion in the face. So, whether that's macabre or not, I'll leave that up to you. Similarly here, a diagram of internal organs, but he's made decisions on what to include, compositional decisions, composition and how he's laying it out. It'll be a big part of what we discussed throughout the semester, composition. In a way, I kind of think this is the most gruesome image of them all because these tools are just so crude. I think a lot of modern surgical tools are still pretty crude. But yeah, once again, it's kind of laid out for information. Each one of them has a little label on it. This is a drawing from Leonardo da Vinci's sketchbook. We've probably all heard of Leonardo da Vinci through certain images like Mona Lisa, for instance, super famous. But Leonardo da Vinci was the, stereotypical Renaissance man, artist, inventor, engineer, philosopher, educator, you name it, he did it. And a lot of the way he used drawing was for problem solving. So, here's a drawing. He would do these, like I said, was an inventor. And in this drawing, he's studying a wing from a bird because he was trying to invent some early human flight apparatuses long before Wright brothers and any, airplane or anything like that. He was trying to start to figure it out. So he would actually study things and draw them out. And these are just quick sketches. So, part of what makes drawings good sometimes is the ability to capture a lot of information accurately, at least in a way that you can tell what's going on in a short amount of time. So this looks like some kind of factory scene. It looks like it was drawn really quickly, but you still get the sense of what it is. Perspective and scale and all these things are all lining up in a way that we can look at it and start picking out the information. It doesn't have to be fully developed and rendered. A lot of what we're going to be doing in this class are time drawings. So you have a short amount of time. How much information can you portray in that short amount of time? Sometimes that's, really shows a lot of skill in drawing. Italian countryside. I imagine he drew this really quickly. Just sketching, sitting up on a hill somewhere. But, we're able to look at it and we get the sense of distance and scale and perspective of where we are in this landscape. So, it's not, is it a perfectly rendered photorealistic drawing? No, but I mean, it's really well laid out in a way that we can read and understand. And it was probably drawn really quickly. This is an image of a skull that looks like part of it was kind of dissected or cut open. Another just example of using drawing as a tool for learning and study. But one thing, we'll come back to this image later, but one thing I love about it is the actual mark making. So this use of kind of diagonal lines across the surface to build up shadow and light. This is an image of Michaelangelo. It's actually a sketch for the Sistine Chapel, which is on the ceiling of the Vatican in Rome. And it's really famous. You've probably seen the painting. It's Adam touching the hand of God. And so, we got Adam here, and then a representation of God over here, and they're kind of reaching out to each other's hands. But this is an initial sketch for the painting, one of the most famous paintings in the world, most famous buildings, paintings, whole thing in the world. So Michelangelo is more who you think of. Sorry, that's a really low quality image, but someone you think of when you think traditional, photo representation, just like high quality, quote unquote, good drawing. Has this really realistic sensibility to it, very well rendered. So traditionally, Renaissance in the contemporary people, when you ask an intro student to, describe a good drawing, they'll describe something along these lines, Michelangelo. But I still think what's really interesting about this work is where he chooses to leave things unfinished. So there's this sense of the drawing being really highly rendered here in the middle, and it just kind of fades off to being less information. We see that in all of them. So like here, the arm faded out. Here, it's like focus a lot on the torso and the musculature, and then in other places, it just kind of is unfinished. He was really known for his use of his anatomy, figurative type of work, and this kind of over exaggeration of the figure. All of his figures are very muscular. Someone else that's more contemporary working with figurative work is an artist named Ed Templeton. I grew up knowing about Ed Templeton because I was really into skateboarding, and he was a professional skateboarder who owned and still owns a company called Toy Machine. So for those of you that skateboard, you probably know at least the company, but he went from being a professional skateboarder, really well known in that world, to really famous artist, has shown his work all over the world, museums in Tokyo and Paris. But he makes this work that's kind of commentary on suburban life in Southern California. He's really well known right now also. He's got like a big Instagram following where he takes a lot of pictures of kind of that the strangeness of life in Huntington Beach. But the drawings, they tell a story and they have this folky sensibility, and they're kind of, compared to like a Michelangelo, it's not what you would consider a good drawing, but they're able to communicate a lot and have a narrative, and they show a strong sense of personal style. So these are good drawings and they're well respected, but they don't have to look like a real person in the photographic sense. This is an artist named Raymond Pettibone. A really interesting character. If you ever get a chance to look him up and watch some interviews, he's a very eccentric, strange dude, but he is an incredible drawer and one of the more famous artists working in drawing. And he got really well known early on for designing all the covers for early punk rock albums, like from Black Flag to Sonic Youth. And he uses India ink and brushes and just works really quickly. But, the drawings, and his personal style helped define that punk rock aesthetic early on, which ended up influencing other rock and metal and album art for generations and still does. I think when we think back on that Michelangelo image of the fabric draped over the draped fabric and how realistically rendered that is, this is another example of showing fabric, but it's so quickly done. But there's so much detail, and you can see all the little folds and creases. And so, it's a very different drawing of fabric, but there's still this high level of detail. And he probably did this really quick, kind of like one of those Leonardo DaVinci drawings that we saw earlier. So the ability to translate what he's seeing, or, maybe it's just coming out of his head, into a way that it's so kind of messy and loose, but we can look at it and know exactly what we're looking at. Maybe less so up here. I mean, maybe UFO going on. Strong sense of personal style. So these are some older drawings by an artist named Ryan Travis Christian. It's one of my favorite. He's from Chicago, contemporary, young guy, youngish. I mean, I guess that's all relative, about my age. But really well known as in the last few years. He's been working for a long time, but in the last few years, has really kind of jumped, and working with some of the, more respected galleries around the world. And these are large charcoal drawings. And so they're kind of chaotic, and they have this like vibrating kind of pattern going on. In a way, they're a little bit hard to look at because they're so almost like psychedelic in their presentation. But what they're almost totally abstracted. Like we can see some little weird ghosts or something that almost like bricks and things that we can almost look at as like we can recognize what they are. But if once we start drawing with charcoal, you'll see how difficult of a medium it is to control in this really fine and detailed sense of it. It's great for being really direct, putting down a lot of value and dark marks easily, but to get this level of control and detail is phenomenal. So difficult. And these drawings aren't even that big. So, his skill in drawing comes down to just the technical ability to control the medium. I mean, they're completely insane. So yeah, sometimes technical facility is more than just being able to draw something like a photograph. It's being able to control it and, be precise with that material. This is an artist named Geoffrey Todd Smith, and just showing an example of something that's completely abstract. These have this kind of like kaleidoscopic, almost like you're looking through a kaleidoscope type of feeling to them. Very geometric, pattern oriented. They have a lot to do with color, but he's drawing with gouache, which is almost kind of close to a painting material, but it's still referred to. Gouache is referred to as a drawing material. It's kind of like a blend between an acrylic and watercolor. So it's technically considered a drawing material, even though you're using brushes the same way that like you can draw with ink, but you're using a brush. But just very hyper detailed. We're not looking at anything recognizable. It's all about pattern and color and form and shape. This is an artist named Chris Duncan, and his work is more on the conceptual side of things. These drawings that he makes have this weird sense of space to them. Like they're completely abstract, but you get the sense of space and movement, almost like you're in this one looking down some deep tunnel. This is a drawing or a photo of one of his works presented in the gallery. So I think what's interesting about what's happening here is you can see if you look at the top of the image that this is actually on a wall in the corner of the room. When you come down here, it almost looks like this is flattened here. And so there's this weird warping of the space that's happening between the corner and the floor. I think what's actually happening is he's drawn on the floor. So the corner of where this side of the wall would be is back here, but the way he's drawn it, looking at it from a certain perspective, it kind of distorts space. So, it's a good drawing in the sense that it distorts our ability to perceive space normally. I mean, confuses our sense of regular perspective in space. Similar kind of drawing, but on paper, you get this like light speed or warp speed kind of perspective. Actually, I think this is on a wall as well because I can see a little outlet here. But it's got that kind of like light speed, warp through outer space sense of movement to it. So this is a really interesting artist who, when I first learned about his work, we were showing with the same gallery in San Francisco. When I first saw it, I was kind of like, I just don't really get it. And I think that I kind of just saw it and walked past it as like something I didn't really like. But the more I learned about the artist's story and process, the more interested in it I became. These drawings are, his work's very conceptual. So it's a lot about the process of making the drawing rather than the actual drawing itself. But these works have this like psychedelic, almost tie-dye, kaleidoscope type of aesthetic to them. But what he's doing is he's folded up large pieces of fabric or paper and then just dip them in computer toner, so like printer ink. Um, and so in a way, there's this like through the use of materials, there's this different reference to technology or almost like this glitchy kind of aesthetic, but it also has this kind of tie-dye 60s psychedelic kind of thing to it as well. So there's this weird kind of like push and pull between era and time. Where these drawings are this kind of the kind of stuff or how I initially came across his work. And it just looks like that kind of art that's, you see in a museum and you're just like, I don't get it. I don't understand. And so I think sometimes, art's not necessarily made to always be understood right away. It's meant to kind of challenge you. And it's not like pop music. Like pop music, you're made to hear it and just enjoy it right away. That's it. There's nothing there. After 2 years, no one cares about it anymore because really the substance is kind of shallow. It's like just made to be enjoyed immediately. It doesn't force you to think deeper. Sometimes the music that you like the best, it's like you might not like it the first time you hear it. Then you hear it again. You're like, actually, I really like this album because you're forced to think about it more. And those might be the albums that you end up listening to throughout the course of your life. And his work kind of feels that way for me. Like these drawings are just huge pieces of carbon paper that he folds up randomly into small little pieces, puts in his pocket. He lives in Vancouver, Canada, and he has a process in his studio where he's working on a bunch of different things at once. So he's got this folded up piece of paper in his pocket that he walks around the whole city in his pocket for months on end, or goes about his daily life with this piece of paper in his pocket as he moves through the city and through his studio. And then when he takes the paper out and unfolds it, he's got these creases everywhere. And when you look at it from above, it almost looks like the map of a city, right? Like if you've seen those photographs of a city from up above, or not so much like a Google map, but like an old illustration or diagram or blueprint almost of a city, these kind of have that weird kind of urban feel to them. So while there's nothing traditional about this as a drawing, it's more like a process-oriented, idea-based conceptual drawing. So like it or not, wrap your head around it or not, he's showing these in fancy galleries and museums. So there's something there. They're a little bit more provocative. It's a way to push the medium of drawing. So, at a certain point, it's like, what can we do to contribute to a medium that's been belabored since there's been human beings? I mean, people were drawing in caves before there was even regular societies, how can we, any of us, not you in particular, contribute to that? How can you do something new? It's so difficult. If you can figure out a way to approach this medium in a new perspective or new way, people are going to take note of that. That's something to have a new idea, and that's really difficult, especially when something's been done by so many people so well for so many centuries. So that's what it is. It's a creative approach to a medium that's been used so much. This drawing has a similar aesthetic to the one before, but this is actually just a charcoal drawing, not folded up. Another example. So this is a drawing by an artist named Tim Hawkinson. He's one of my favorites. He does these kind of figurative drawings a lot of the time. He's also really well known. He's just like a very multimedia artist. Works in drawing, works in sculpture and technology and painting and weird. You see his work in an installation with like big robotics and weird stuff going on. I really like this drawing because it has this kind of anatomical reference, right? Like it almost looks like internal organs or intestines. But the way he drew this, like Niall McClelland, it's very process oriented. He's inventing tools. So he actually takes a drill, like an impact driver, and puts a device on the end that has a red pen. And depending on the speed he spins the drill, it makes a bigger or smaller circle. So he just using this drill to draw these kind of patterns on, and then it almost looks like this anatomical thing, like the body. So maybe conceptually the work is about this tool as this kind of extension of the body, or anatomical or anthropomorphic extension of our human body. So, another way to think about that is like, this computer I'm working on would look totally different if we didn't have arms. Or what would a car look like if we had 4 legs and 6 arms? It would be designed completely different. So, everything that we use around us is designed as this kind of extension of our body to work with our bodies. So, that's just my kind of interpretation of what his drawing could be. Maybe it's something else. So this is an artist who's a friend of mine a long time ago, kind of lost touch recently, but her name's Collette. She's primarily working in painting now, but for a while she's working on drawing. And initially when you look at this, it just looks like a bunch of blocks, nothing too exciting. But when you look up close and when you see how she actually is making these, she's using a pencil, and just there's a million little marks to create each one of these shapes. So they're very methodical, and it's all done with lines basically. So it's just this labored little drawing of line, line, line to create these big boxes. And they take hours and hours and hours, weeks, months to finish something like this. So, for her, it's more about the labor put into it. It's not about it looking like something representational. Sometimes they do have this weird sense of perspective or space while still being totally abstracted. It's almost like looking through windows or looking through walls, or is this a sense of perspective in the way that these angles are going down? It's abstract, but it has these kind of references to that a little bit. But once again, she didn't just go in with a big, stick of graphite like we've got in our materials bin and fill this whole thing in. She took a tiny little pencil, line after line after line, to fill in all this black. So her skill and her work comes into the labor and the time put into it. It's like got this meticulous, careful nature to it. So this is an artist named Joel Daniel Phillips. He works in San Francisco, and these drawings are huge. They're like 12 feet tall. Just like a Michaelangelo, what you'd think of when you think of good drawing, like incredibly rendered, beautiful drawing. They're primarily made with charcoal and graphite, and he's able to, mix these mediums seamlessly in a way that you can't tell which one's which is really difficult to do. But they're huge and they're photographic, and that's great. He can draw really well. But what makes these drawings good pieces of art and not just interesting drawings is, you can draw perfectly well, 100% photograph, fantastic. You're a skilled craftsperson. But what makes that a good piece of art? I would argue, and I think many people would, that just because you can draw well doesn't make you a good artist, doesn't make it a good piece of art. Because big deal, you drew a lemon or a bowl of fruit. What are you trying to say with that? Sometimes art's more about, well, all the time art's more about the idea behind it and the intention, the story, what you're trying to communicate. So his work is all about, he's got a studio in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. It's like notoriously lots of people on the street, lots of drugs, and it's just kind of grimy and gnarly. But his studio is there, and he leaves the studio and he interacts with the people on the street all the time. And he's drawing these figures, that these people that you might just normally walk by in society without giving any attention, 12 feet tall, rendered for hundreds of hours. So in a way, he gives them this stage or this platform. They're like heroic figures just through the act and through the process of his drawing. So that's what makes these interesting pieces of art. The intention behind it, the scale at which he's drawing these people that are overlooked. So it kind of flips it. He's not just drawing anybody for the most part. This is a process shot of one of the drawings being built up. So, they're amazing renderings. He sells these drawings for tens of thousands of dollars to celebrities and famous people all over the world. But like I said, what makes them impactful for me is that sense of taking that kind of duality between who these people are in normal life and who he makes them into through these drawings. So like this one, for instance, is David Lynch with the chicken. I'm a huge fan of David Lynch, but I think this is, it's a beautiful drawing, but as a piece of art, a lot less interesting because it's David Lynch. It loses that conceptual kind of underpinning. If you don't know David Lynch, he's a famous artist and filmmaker. This is an artist named Paul Wackers. Paul is primarily known for his paintings, his acrylic paintings, but he does work in drawing as well. And this looks like a graphite drawing. It looks almost just like some sculptural object. I think this one's a really interesting example of a drawing. It's an ink drawing, and it's not a perfectly rendered plant, but he's able to use ink and just let it run loose and wild and get smudgy and weird all over the page, but we can still look at it and recognize that's a potted plant. So his ability to control a really difficult medium to control and still make it look like something that we recognize is what makes this an interesting drawing. It's what makes it a good drawing. For him, it's not about looking like a photograph. It's about still being recognizable while having this loose kind of textural quality to it, letting the medium kind of do what it wants a little bit. So on a whole extreme end of it, of course, me being terrible with names right now, I'm blanking on this gal's name, but I will put her in the, it's Monika something or other. Sorry, I'll put her in the list of all the artists so you'll be able to check it out. But in, what was it, 2015, 2016, well, I was awarded a grant in 2015, or in 2016, I went to Iceland for a month or so. And as a part of a big project through the Regional Arts and Culture Council in Portland. And I did a big project with shows and murals and all this stuff after I traveled throughout Iceland and looked at the Northern Lights. But long story short, when I was there, I was in Reykjavik, started and ended in Reykjavik, and I went to the Reykjavik Museum, and there was this woman there who had this presentation of drawings. So these are three-dimensional drawings just using black tape inside of a gallery space. Like I said, completely different, wild, contemporary, new approach to drawing. Three-dimensional. But it's still dealing with all the things that we're going to deal with in drawing. When you read about it in her little like post on the wall there, she referred to these as drawings, straight up. They weren't sculptures, they weren't installations, they were drawings. But she's dealing with line, she's dealing with composition, she's dealing with space, she's dealing with contrast. A lot of elements that we're going to talk about throughout the semester are right here in these drawings. The interesting thing about these is the composition changes depending where in the room you are. So here, it's another shot of a different one. It's like dense areas of mark making, and it opens up, and even like the shadows on the wall and in the space become part of that composition. Is it a drawing like a Michaelangelo? No, but it is just a different new approach to what a drawing can be. And these are good drawings. So remember, like, a good drawing isn't always about it looking like a photograph. If you get stuck only thinking that good drawing is looking like a photograph, you're going to be frustrated. Unless you can already draw that way, you'll get closer to that if you really work hard. But very few people actually master that. So sometimes it's about finding your own style, finding your own voice in it. And I want to encourage you to do that throughout the semester, because not everyone draws that way, and that's fine. Some of the most famous artists in the world can't draw photorealistically, but they can draw in a way that's new and unique and interesting. I thought this was super impactful. Like, the kind of thing that I walked in and I was like, what am I even looking at? Read about it a little bit, and it's like, oh, these are drawings? Wow, that's a new way to think about a drawing. So yeah, I mean, if you take away anything from this, it's that we don't need to only worry about drawing in one sense of it. Drawing is a lot of things, and while we are going to focus early on with trying to, it is an intro drawing class, so whether you're a beginner or not, a good place to start with these classes is just breaking it down to the very fundamentals, starting with line, starting with shape and value and form and all of these basics that allow us to get to this point of really breaking things down visually to make a representational drawing. Some people are going to excel in that area, and then other people are going to excel in being more creative and conceptual in it. Some people will be able to walk that line between both, kind of like a Joel Daniel Phillips with those kind of really photorealistic drawings. So, we're all going to find our own way through it. And just because you can't draw like Michaelangelo doesn't mean you're making bad drawings. Are you working hard and trying? That's how I'm going to be grading you this semester. I don't look, it can be really subjective, right? So like, I'm not looking at your work when I'm grading it. First off, you'll have rubrics that explain how I'm grading everything, but I'm not looking at it like, do I think this is a good drawing or not? That's a subjective, it has nothing to do with my opinion on it. I'm looking at like, did you follow project guidelines? Did you put in the necessary time? Do you really try? Does it look like you cared and you actually tried? That's primarily how I'm grading. So, you might think, oh, this drawing is terrible. But if you've put that effort into it, I'm not going to think that. I'll know that, this is good. You made good progress. Sometimes a good drawing is just, failing miserably because you learned from it. You may make a beautiful photorealistic drawing, but if you didn't learn anything from it, what's the point? Draw a bowl of fruit, big deal. A million people have done that throughout history. So we're trying to push a little further than that. Hopefully through this presentation, you've been able to see that drawing's more than just representing like a photograph. So while we will try to do that and try to learn how to see in that format, drawing's a lot more than that. So really, this is all that we're doing for our first, intro to our class. We're going to meet again on Thursday, and then I am going to discuss all of our materials with you, and we're going to have an abstract drawing exercise that's going to continue to break down what a good drawing is. So we're just going to use our materials, make completely abstract images, and continue to break down what a good drawing is. Most of the drawing is about learning how to use your materials properly. So you have this packet, or if you don't have your packet yet, you just have whatever is available to you at home. And we're going to make some fun, wild, different drawings. So, yeah, check in on your canvas Thursday. I'll have it posted up by noon. Email me with any questions. If you need to add or drop, the deadline to do so is on Friday, so get back to me ASAP. If you don't drop before Friday, you need to get, I can't drop you after that point. So you can let me know if you want to drop before then. Otherwise, it's up to you to drop. And if you don't and you never show up, I don't really have any other choice legally but to give you a fail at the end. So be in touch with me. Email me anytime. We'll work on Zoom, work on downloading that. I'm going to try to set up a meeting with us all soon. Thanks so much, and do your best to gather your materials before we meet again, or as soon as you possibly can. Thank you, and I'll be in touch shortly.